Hundreds of Mainers gathered at the State House today to testify both for and against LD 1619.
The bill proposed by Governor Mills would expand abortion access in Maine. Sierra Whaley has more from Augusta.
We have a voice, they don't. We need to be the voice for them. So that's what we're all about.
An act to improve Maine's reproductive privacy laws, or LD 1619, was proposed in early April by Governor Mills, looking to extend reproductive rights of women and abortion access across the state.
No one should be forced to remain pregnant against the advice of their trusted medical provider. And Maine's law, as written, is doing just that.
Sponsored by House Speaker Rachel Talbot Ross and Senate President Troy Jackson, LD 1619 would allow abortion after viability or later in the pregnancy if or when a licensed physician determines it's necessary. Bethany Bosang, Senior Policy Advisor for Governor Mills, said the bill looks to protect the rare cases of women having an option for abortion due to limited circumstances. However, opponents believe this proposal will do more harm than good.
What caused the governor to introduce this bill is the stories that you'll hear today from women in Maine who have had direct personal experiences later in their pregnancies where they've had to leave the state under heartbreaking circumstances to get needed health care.
My heart is really for the babies that are at risk and the mothers.
Members of the Maine Right to Life Coalition rallied at the State House opposing the bill.
I don't believe Maine wants to have extreme abortion laws like this. We have laws that are adequate now for saving the life of a mother. This would take it all the way to day of birth, which doesn't even make sense to me.
The bill would also remove criminal penalties for performing an abortion after fetal viability or without being licensed as a physician, physician assistant, or advanced practice registered nurse.
I think no matter what, if the baby's born with Down syndrome or one leg or one arm, it's a life. It's worth it. It's a precious gift.
While Republicans and Democrats remain split on the issue, Democrats are unlikely to have trouble passing the bill. There were enough co-sponsors to ensure a majority. Sierra Whaley, WABI TV 5 News, Augusta.